So continuing our conversations at the SIT show this year on the ITSMF stand, I'm with Steve Morgan of SIAM Solutions. Is that right?
SIAM IT Solutions.
SIAM IT. I'm terribly sorry. Steve, you've been one of our supporters and collaborators over the last few years, particularly with the SIAM Special Interest Group, and I know that that's a big part of the work that you do with your company and been involved in various other things. SIAM is an interesting, it's one of those things that comes up a lot. What is it?
As organisations are moving from single-sourced operating models where they rely on one vendor for most of their IT services, they're moving to a smarter sourcing model where they take more services from different vendors. That represents some new challenges in terms of IT operating model, IT processes. In simple terms, things like incident, problem, change, request all get a bit more complicated. So essentially, SIAM is a way of knitting all of those individual processes from the individual vendors together into a single coherent operating model. In simple terms, it's the bit of ITIL v3 that was never written for multi-vendors, I guess.
I wondered where that got. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of supply chain glue, kind of.
Yeah.
What we should always have been doing, really. But
I think we've all been doing it over a number of years, to be honest with you. We've just never really written it down. So that's what we're trying to do now, is kind of retrofit ITIL, ISO 20000, Sophia, all those frameworks that are around, SIAM, of course, and make it work from a multi-vendor perspective. So.
And just give me a flavour of what's different about that then. I mean, you could say, well, we've always managed complex and multivarious environments. What's different about SIAM?
I think it's easy to think about SIAM as multi-vendor ITSM, and it's a bit broader than that. So in a SIAM operating model, we still need to manage demand coming into the business. We still need to deliver projects. We still need to manage our contracts and commercials. So what SIAM's essentially doing is providing that operational glue that you described, but also giving us some information about how we build our overarching IT operating model to cover the whole facet of the IT lifecycle, from demand of a service through to delivery of it.
So it is lifecycle, cradle, grave stuff.
Yes.
But in a multi-vendor.
Absolutely. Yeah, but the difficulty is every vendor's got their own solution for SIAM.
Yeah.
So every vendor will come along and say, here's our approach that works. Now that will only work if all the vendors are speaking the same way. So SIAM provides a bit of common terminology as well.
Yeah, I mean that for me is one thing, because for a while there's been a lot of people doing SIAM, but it's all been different.
Yeah.
And I know you've been part of the team that's built the recent training program and body of knowledge with XNBCS stuff.
Yes.
What for you was the main sort of positive outcome of that?
I think a few things really. So we were involved in the architect group for the SIAM Foundation, and now we're doing the SIAM Professional. That's made up of, that architect group is made up of people from customers, consultants, service providers. So getting different experiences into the mix and providing that common language has been really useful.
I mean, you've got some clear definitions now that, whether or not everybody agrees, but they are clear what the...
Yeah, absolutely. So that helps, particularly when you're contracting. But I think the other thing for me was making it a bit more real. So saying, in a multi-vendor model, you've got 4 different choices for your operating model, and this is broadly what they'll look like, and these are the pros and cons of each, and this is how you might design it. So that's been really helpful as well, just getting that practicality written down and making it a bit more alive.
Yeah, I mean, I've read the content, and it does look as if it's written by people who have done it,
Yes.
Been there, and
that's what I've always been about, Barclay, right? For me, this IT service management stuff has always been about common sense written down, And we've been managing multi-vendors in an IT operations world now for years. We just haven't really written it down. So I'm trying to, with the SIAM stuff, we're trying to write things down from a very practical, pragmatic perspective rather than from an academic one. It's quite hard when you then have to turn that into an exam, so it has to be a little bit academic. But that body of knowledge has been a really good way of bringing that to life. And we're applying that now in customers with the work that I'm doing with SIAM.
Yeah. And from the business point of view, are you seeing more active participation? You got more projects, more interest?
Yeah, I think what's been interesting is, there's a preconception that SIAM's just public sector. It isn't, and in the UK there's always been quite a lot of private sector work. Now that's moving into Central Europe and America as well, so we're seeing a lot of interest from Central Europe in both public and private sector, and also in North America now as well. We also started to get some interest from Australia recently as well. Not quite sure how I want to send my consultants halfway across the world to deliver the work, but
I'm sure there'll be Australian consultants.
I'm sure there will be someone that could do it.
Just finally, one thing, because we do talk to a lot of people in this kind of scenario, and there's always a different topic.
Yeah.
And SIAM seems to be very much at the practical, pragmatic end, and then you've got things like digital and DevOps, and which is more about culture.
All that airy-fairy stuff.
How does DevOps and SIAM fit together?
That's a really interesting question, and we could probably sit here and talk for hours on that one. I think the important thing is, in a multi-vendor operating model, each of the service providers are going to have their own way of doing things, be that DevOps or Agile or any mix or combination of any of those delivery methods. The important thing from a SIAM perspective is ensuring that the inputs and the outputs from a process point of view are understood, and that where teams need to collaborate with one another, they're collaborating in a consistent way. And the outputs are understood, and how they're going to deliver it is understood at the outset, and that's where the operating model really needs to come into play to deliver that. So I think they can.
Operating model.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily part of the, because there's a lot of argument about DevOps not being no ops, but actually just saying, well, this is an operating model.
Yes.
Is going to be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said this before, maybe quite controversially, but I don't believe that you do ITIL. I don't believe you do SIAM to the exclusion of everything else. Yeah. These are tools in our tool bag, right? So what we've got now is we've got a framework in SIAM that enables us to build an IT operating model that enables any delivery method to be used dynamically with different service providers, as long as we understand how it all joins together and how it all knits up, and that's really the intent.
Okay, great stuff. Steve, thanks very much. Speak to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks Barclay, good to speak to you.